Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our unboxing and first impressions look at the China Mobile M3. So China Mobile is a carrier in China, of course. It's similar to AT&T or T-Mobile, and in the past 1 or 2 years, they've been making some budget-oriented smartphones that are less expensive than many brand names just because as a carrier, they can subsidize the pricing on the phones more because they make revenue off of services. So the N3 is another excellent value device because it sells as low as $75, and for the price you're getting a 18:9 aspect ratio 6-inch Full HD Plus display, an octa-core Snapdragon 625 processor. It's a dual SIM 4G LTE device, and it also has a dual camera on board with 12 megapixels and 8 megapixels to capture bokeh-like effects. So these specs are very similar to other offerings by Xiaomi, maybe the Mi A2 Lite, the Mi A1, the Redmi Note 5. All of these phones though sell for about $200 or under, and at 75 bucks, this device basically undercuts those already low-cost phones by half. It also features either 3 or 4 gigs of built-in RAM and a glass and aluminum build in addition to Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3.0 technology. So again, on paper, this might be one of the best value budget smartphones ever because the price is really as low as you're going to find, but performance is going to be better than you'll expect, especially for a device under $100. So taking a closer look at the packaging, it is very simple because, again, this is mostly a carrier and not a manufacturer of smartphones. We've already seen the A3 from China Mobile just a few months back, which used a Snapdragon 400 series processor. That one was even cheaper, and that performed quite well. Again, it went up against the Redmi, but it was even cheaper. Downsides would be the software isn't quite as polished as Xiaomi's MIUI, since they don't have as much R&D that goes into the software development as a larger phone manufacturer. But the hardware as well as kind of the raw processing speed are all pretty good. So we have the phone right on top. It's carefully wrapped up. It comes in a few different colors. We have the sapphire blue edition here. We see the dual lens setup on the back, very similar to phones like the Poco phone, for instance, with that vertical setup. We also have access to a SIM ejector tool. There's also a free TPU soft carrying case included to protect the phone, which is nice. I do want to point out that the construction quality is also a step up compared to the Mi A1, the Mi A2, and the Redmi phones because it's made completely out of aluminum and glass, which is curved on the front and on the back, compared to a lot of Redmi devices which have some plastic antenna bands on the top and the bottom to cut down on costs a little bit. Here's the Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0 enabled charger, which gives you pretty much 60% juice in less than half an hour, so very quick in terms of topping up the battery. We also have a micro USB cable for charging. So that's the only downside, is it doesn't have a USB Type-C connector, but rather the older micro USB. Unwrapping the phone here, something that does strike me is the design is quite similar to something like a Samsung Galaxy S8 or S9, especially with those curved glass edges, maybe even something like the Huawei Mate 10 Pro, and that's definitely not a bad thing because this phone feels like something that would cost maybe $600 to $800, definitely not only 75 bucks, so extremely impressive there. The glass even has this interesting effect which shimmers and has this 3D pattern which shifts its color ever so slightly whenever you tilt it against the light. Very impressive. On the side we have access to a volume rocker and a power on-off switch which is textured, very tactile and easy to press. On the bottom we have the single speaker micro USB for charging and a microphone. There is no stereo speaker on this, but it's forgivable at this low price. You can see kind of that curved edges, the chamfered aluminum, SIM card tray, and on the top there is a 3.5mm headphone jack. The phone is booting up now for the first time. Again, this is called the N3. And we can tell that on the front, the bezel sizes are respectable. They are very similar to a Xiaomi Redmi device, so they are pretty slim on the left and the right, but they're still noticeable on the top and the bottom. But at least we don't have a notch, which I think bothers more people at this point. So we can use the entire display for consuming media, which is great. It still has dimensions of roughly a 5.5-inch phone of 2016 or 2017, so it still is relatively easy to grip, but it's rather slippery because of the glass back. However, again, it has a nice weight overall. We're going to proceed through the setup here, setting up Wi-Fi. The splash screen here is definitely customized. It's different from a stock Android device. So immediately we are greeted into the interface. It gives us a few prompts that tells us we can tap on various things to check our profile, for instance. We do have on-screen controls, of course, for going back home, back, and for opening up multitasking. And you can tell here that there are a few preloaded apps and titles on here, so there is going to be a little bit of bloatware because, again, China Mobile is a carrier. So you can think of it as getting a phone through AT&T or T-Mobile's prepaid network. So there is going to be some apps exclusive to the carrier, which you can uninstall, but it's not going to be as uncluttered as an Android One device, for instance. Drag down notification shade with the blue accents, again, reminds me of Huawei devices, but the keys on the bottom, the icons are very similar graphically to a Samsung phone. So again, it's an interesting mashup almost of Samsung and Huawei in many ways. So this is interesting. This is kind of the proprietary AI assistant the China Mobile M3 is using. It's different from anything I've seen before. It's definitely not Bixby like on Samsung. It's not even what Google is using on their stock devices. It's geared towards the Chinese demographic, but you can use it to ask questions, and it can search them up on the internet. It can speak to you. The functions are pretty similar, but again, it is a proprietary AI assistant and not using something like Alexa, for instance. Now, there is no app tray on the bottom, so if you do want to have access to a full list of your applications, you probably have to slap your own launcher on top of this thing. But otherwise, we do have customizable pages that we can fill up with applications and widgets. Otherwise, you can see that scrolling and animations seem to be respectable, which is expected, considering the Snapdragon 625 is still a very capable chipset after all, especially on a mid-end device. It is very energy efficient, and this phone has roughly a 3,200 milliamp hour capacity cell, which gives you sufficient power to last through an entire day, a day and a half, without any issues. And a look at some of the wallpapers which you get right out of the box here, which are customizable, and again, they are very different from a stock Android device, so they're all here because of China Mobile. Now, the launcher that they're using here is the same across all of their phones that they've come out within the past few months, including the aforementioned A3 and the A3 Plus, which is again a cheaper variant. The N3 is actually their flagship model, despite having pretty mid-end specs, because the other phones are more budget in terms of specs. So this is what the camera interface looks like. This one reminds me of iOS a little bit, but it is a real dual camera lens. It's not a fake one that just gives you a weird blur effect, because again, this is a legitimate company that has more reputation than, say, Elephone, for instance. And just a quick look at what the screen is like in terms of visibility. If we're pointing it in a more outdoor-like environment, you can tell that it's a little bit harder to see. It is a very reflective panel, but overall, you can tell that you can still make out most of the text without too many problems here. Definitely a fingerprint magnet, however, because of the glass surface that they're using here. And otherwise, because this phone is meant for the Chinese demographic, again, China Mobile, it does not come with any Google Play services pre-installed, and that might be the biggest draw compared to a Xiaomi phone, which has a global edition of the ROM. So again, you probably have to install your own launcher or somehow root it if you want to bring back those Google services. You can always install APKs directly, but that again is something that you will have to do yourself, which again might be one of the only downsides that we're seeing at this really low price, but perhaps it's worth it, considering again it really is so much cheaper than its competition. We'll be doing a lot more testing and come out with a more complete review soon, so be sure to stay tuned. But that's been our unboxing, first impressions look at the N3.